We're here in the back bay and we have a ton of millwork installed, as well as most of the paint is complete, and we've had some miscellaneous carpentry pieces that we had to wrap up, as well as a mantelpiece that our team built that John Buckley designed. Very subtle details in it, paid homage to what was originally there, but modernized it, which is pretty much the theme throughout this space. But we are down in the primary bedroom. This is one of the most impressive pieces of millwork on site. So a couple things you're gonna notice. Number one, there's no doors or drawer fronts installed. Those get installed later, and the reason being is they open, they close, they swing, and we don't want them to get damaged. They oftentimes do. So basically what you're seeing that is installed is stuff that is permanent. First off, let's talk about what was here. There was a brick fireplace here, so you're gonna see a bunch of funkiness going on. You have that soffit up top here, then you have this section here. Essentially what we're doing is we're utilizing every cubic inch of this space. Not cubic foot, but cubic inch. Every inch really matters here in the back bay of Boston. It's very valuable, and when you're dealing with condensed space, you wanna be maximizing storage. Right here is set up for a TV. If I pull out this drawer, you're actually gonna see that full depth over here, and then we have a small section here. Now, the reality is maybe you're not gonna use that space. Maybe you do have something that stands vertically, but what this does is it gives it the entire width to install that drawer front. And when it does get closed, it does look like a full drawer. So why is this one of the most impressive ones? Well, it's because we really took the time to make sure we were going to maximize all that space, and took the time to work through all of the field dimensions of exactly what was here to be able to accomplish this. When they were installing it, you're actually gonna see some blocks on the floor, as well as our European plastic leveling feet. They actually installed it at a lower elevation, and they tied this crown molding in, which is consistent with the room, so it has that shadow gap on the vertical and horizontal surface. They actually installed this first with a big return piece and essentially cranked the cabinet up and against it. That way we have this seamless crown molding all the way throughout, and then the cabinet dies into it. And then once the doors and everything are on, they'll actually flush out with that return piece that you see up top there. Flipping to this wall, we have a small desk, some fixed shelving, some drawers, and then of course an area for the chair. All of that got installed, all paint grade, all assembled on site. Finally, a really great detail here is that we have our cabinet finish, and then we have a nice intentional 1/4 inch space before our plaster finish. Now this is a detail that I think a lot of you guys should pay attention to. When you are flushing out two surfaces or dissimilar materials, try to create something that's intentional that separates the two. By adding that shadow gap, you get that nice flush look, but an intentional separation. As we make our way through here, you're gonna see a lot of site protection, so a quick shout out to Tim, our site super, for making sure everything gets protected. As we work our way down, I'm gonna stop at the primary bathroom. You can see that we have our medicine cabinets installed. We got a little patching around the medicine cabinets to do. Sometimes this stuff goes in and we have to modify the wall, and we have to stop, take a pause, get these things fit. It's likely that we'll probably pull those back out, patch in the wall board, and get those things into its final resting position. If you look up top, it actually looks like they cut that to install some additional blocking to make sure that those medicine cabinets were installed properly. Before we head down, I want to stop and talk about the Balco access panels. We've talked about these a lot. Here's a great example. We've shown you them on the wall. They also offer them on the ceiling. So if I were to push up on that, it's actually going to drop down. You can see that we can access what looks to be some electrical connections, even some HVAC equipment. But when it's all said and done, you take that, you push up. Really good looking install. Working our way down, speaking of plaster, we also have the bottom of our stairs all plastered. So this is a really great detail. This is something that we worked really long and hard on with the architect, John Buckley, but also Colby and his team at Trowel Inc. And this stair was actually built by Bob King and his team up in New Hampshire. It was delivered in a few pieces. You can see that in a previous episode. And then all of this got framed, and the bottom side is plaster. So I want to call attention to a couple things here. Here's our wood stringer, and what they did is they have this really intentional 1/8 inch bead between the wood stringer and the plaster. Similar to when we're talking about dissimilar materials, you want some sort of separation. That could be plastered tight, you could caulk that, but you don't get that really hard, crisp, clean line when you caulk it. Here we have that 1/8 inch gap, so even if this was painted, say these were painted 2 different colors, you get a really, really hard line, and that shadow just kind of enunciates that hard line. When the reality is, I think here we're actually going to be painting them very similar colors, but still you get that nice clean line. You can see how that goes all the way up and actually works its way around and follows it all the way back to our corner here. It allows the stair to be kind of its own thing, more like a furniture piece, we could say. Additionally, you can see that our baseboard goes into the corner, actually curves around. The way we accomplish that, Kukin Brothers Molding, which we've worked with on this entire project, they actually offer the base cap in a flexible molding. So it's a resin type product that allowed us to get that bend. And on the bottom here, we actually used a piece of PVC. It goes all the way to the outside corner, but that's a piece of PVC because we were able to get the radius in there. Lastly, we had the team at Materia actually laminate a curved door to match this curve. One of the benefits of this being so perfectly plastered, or close to perfect, we could hold that true radius, and once it's installed, this will all be nice and flush, similar to the Balco access panels, which again, here's another one. This one actually features a grate. The reason this features a grate is because we'll have some low voltage equipment in there. The low voltage equipment will cause some heat, so this will give it some airflow to make sure that we're not encapsulating all that heat. And if we ever have to access it in there, let me get that right, we have the ability to open it up entirely, and then all of this will get painted and be consistent with the wall colors. I want to call attention to something that we're doing behind here. We have a marble floor install. One of the things that we find with a lot of these marble floors, especially the stuff that is installed on, say, a mesh backing or tile that is glued to a mesh, that glue oftentimes makes that tile not sit so flat. Your final lighting should always be installed. You want to be looking at the floor in its final condition. Oftentimes they're installing it with construction lights. What happens is that when you do have your final lighting on, you start to see all the shadows and the imperfections at a later date, and your client ends up being really upset. We find with the basket weave or stuff that is installed on that mesh, then we should absolutely bring in a marble restoration company. What he's doing behind me is he's actually polishing the floor. And he's not just polishing it for the level of polish intensity, but he's also flattening it. So he's taking any of the hard edges off, he's making sure that the floor is really consistent, and it's giving it that close to perfect look rather than having those discrepancies. We've looked at it a couple different ways. We've also taken the time to take apart some of these mesh-backed tile products, and we haven't been super successful with it. It's very hard to keep that pattern consistent, and we find that for a day's worth of work to polish a floor, it is more than worth it for the final product. So up on the second floor here, we also have a bunch of millwork installed, as well as our mantle. But we'll start with this one here. So this one is designed to look like a piece of furniture. As you come in the entryway here, you have a bunch of drawers for storage. Again, you don't see any of the doors and drawers installed now. And this one actually, you'll see it's only primed. So this one will actually be painted on site. It's designed to have a hand brushed finish. Right adjacent to that, we had this under stair storage, which we wanted to utilize as a closet. And the guys at Materia and our carpenters here at NS Builders worked on building this hidden door. And I say hidden with air quotes, mainly because it's not designed to completely go away. If we were trying to make it completely hidden, you wouldn't have the exposed hardware. We would be more intentional with trying to cover up the gaps. And you also, which you don't see right now, you also wouldn't have a traditional doorknob. Instead, it's quote unquote hidden, meaning that it's just less subtle. Rather than a case opening door or case door with paneling on it, we wanted it to be flush. It'll all be painted the wall color. You see the base runs across it, but you do have your exposed hardware as well as your future doorknob, which says, yes, it is a door. You do have extra storage in here. I think the client went as far to say, especially in the city, that this would be great for stroller storage. You know, a dad to 4 kids, I think I have a stroller for each one of them. This would be almost enough to store all of my strollers in. But as we work into the kitchen here, you can see that all of the boxes are installed, and very similar to downstairs, none of the drawers and doors are installed. All of what we call the architectural stuff is installed, so all of our fillers up against any painted surface. Painters are on site wrapping up. We want to make sure that all of that's installed, so any caulking that Materia does from their cabinetry to a painted surface is done and installed prior to any final paint touch-ups. Two last things I want to showcase. This is actually part of the bar over here, and you can see the inside is a cool blue. It's designed to be this kind of Easter egg in the millwork, so when you open the door, you're kind of surprised by the blue compared to what you see the white oak and all the other cabinetry. But the team actually did a really great job in installing these slots. So these slots will actually go through that opening into what we call the stroller garage. And that's designed for the microwave. So the microwave, the team looked at the specs, realized it vented out the back, added some ventilation in the cabinetry. It is not a built-in microwave, it's just a pretty standard one. We wanted to make sure that we were gonna give that proper ventilation. Lastly, I wanna talk about this mantle. First thing you're gonna notice is I'm about 6 feet tall. The scale is really large. It's designed to really work with the height of the ceiling. John Buckley designed this with Karen Howard as the interior designer and the client to really be a simple interpretation of what was here before. You have a really nice thick top piece. We have our Kuchen Brothers crown molding that is being brought from above down, and then we have these columns that start out square, and then we have this small half round, and then you have the slightest flare going from the square down to the fatter base. And then this actually ties into our floor base to a different profile. And you can see things like this square stock actually allows the floor base to tie into it without interrupting this secondary base cap detail. So our carpenters handled this. Painters are on site. They're going to be wrapping up the final paint here, and then we have our stone being installed, and then we're going to roll into punch list. So stay tuned for the next episode as we get closer and closer to delivering this project to this awesome client.